A new round of Israeli airstrikes in Yemen targeted the Houthi rebel-held capital and multiple ports. All of this while the World Health Organization's Director General said the bombardment occurred nearby as he prepared to board a flight in Sanaa. This with a crew member injured. A lot to discuss this morning as relates to this breaking news. So we want to bring into the conversation Dr. Asaf Romirowsky. He's the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East. Dr. Asaf, good morning to you. Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So first, we always appreciate as you contextualize these events. We know the conflict with Israel and the Yemen Houthi rebels, nothing new, but many people saw this escalation out along the Red Sea as it relates to, the ports and the cargo ships. Could you provide the latest update as it relates to this latest airstrike?
Sure. So let's make it to be clear here. I mean, this is the exact retaliation to the ongoing barrage of ballistic missiles that have been hitting the state of Israel for the past few weeks now. And we've seen now an acceleration of targets and the success rate of where these targets have been hitting inside of internal parts of Israel, areas of the metropolitan near Tel Aviv, areas near the airport, areas near Jaffa. So as a result of that, the IDF has come out with a clear statement that they will, of course, continue to fight the Houthis as they've been fighting every other proxy of Iran in this multi-front war against Iran. So the targets that were chosen by the Israeli Air Force and was reiterated by the Defense Ministry in the state of Israel said that they went after the airport in Sanaa. They took out infrastructure as far as refineries, all these logistical areas and infrastructural necessities that the Houthis have been using to attack the state of Israel. And so the other point that is worth noting, of course, is that once again, the reestablishment of deterrence coming out of the Houthis. I mean, we've seen over the past few weeks, and you and I have discussed this, an acceleration in their capability. That is to say that at the beginning of the war, we've seen the Houthis being able to hit the southern part of Israel, namely areas of Eilat, which is the southern part of Israel. We've seen them being able to disrupt the flow of commerce when it comes to the Red Sea, which is a major threat not only to Israel, which is again another point that needs to be made here, but also to everybody else who deals with commerce in the Red Sea, including the United States, as far as import-export, as far as the Far East. So these are major disruptions where the Houthis have been able to make an influence. And now we are seeing an acceleration where you're hitting central parts of Israel that are continuing to be bombarded and to be hurting civilians with ballistic missiles. And again, the message coming out of the Houthis is analogous to the same messaging that we've seen coming out of Hamas and Hezbollah, and amplified by the Iranians that, of course, we want them to continue. As a result of that, the Israelis now that have turned the corner in many of these other fronts regarding Lebanon and Gaza, now have the ability to basically turn their attention to what's happening in the Houthi areas in Yemen, and that's exactly what you're seeing now take place now. The other concern that is worthy of note is whether or not in the interim here, Iran has been able to supply more sophisticated weaponry to the Houthis. And of course, the Israelis want to put a kibosh on that as well.
Yeah, and that's the concern this morning. As you put it, Yemen Houthi rebels are backed by Iran proxy groups, and people are concerned this morning. What more could Iran do to further propel the Yemen Houthi rebels in their fight against Israel? We're also seeing it simultaneously with how Iran proxy groups are also aiding Hezbollah and Hamas, as you just mentioned.
100%. I mean, the bigger concern has always been, this has always been the main tension, is between the shifting between conventional and non-conventional weaponry. And so in Lebanon, when it comes to Hezbollah, We know that there are chemical facilities. The Israelis have been taking out chemical facilities all the way going back to the early 2000s. And so each one of these Iranian proxies has capabilities when it comes to chemical and biological weaponry, not full WMDs, but all of that is a main concern. And whether or not the Houthis get their hand on chemical weapons and are able to target central parts of Israel, that is creates I mean, all of this is, but an existential threat to those areas, something that the Israelis will not stand by and let go by. And so they're doing whatever they can in their power to make sure that no matter where the enemies are, I mean, this is again another facet of this war, geographically speaking. Israel is taking the war to the area where these missiles are coming from. They're not waiting for them to come to them. They are taking the war to them. And that's a significant move when it comes to fighting an Air Force battle when it comes in the area of Yemen. So that's, again, all very telling about the acceleration and the concerns that the Israelis have as it relates to that. Again, as always, you can see that the level of sophistication, as we did see with Israel's retaliation when it came to Iran, on these surgical strikes, and their ability to differentiate between combatants and non-combatants and to choose their targets very clearly, something that the opposition and and all these proxies of Iran do not do. They are looking for as much destruction as possible and as much harm to civilians as possible without distinguishing between women, children, elderly, and whatnot. These are all legitimate targets as far as every one of Iranian proxies are concerned, including the Houthis.
Dr. Asaf, we know from the very beginning that Israel has called upon different world leaders to step up and aid in this fight against these terroristic entities. And what you mentioned happening out along the Red Sea with the Yemen Houthi rebels, Israel has further used that as a reason for the U.S. and other world leaders to step up and help, saying, you know what, you all are being impacted as it relates to trade and commerce. Have you seen a world leader stepping up to aid Israel? Or do you share that sentiment with Israel that more needs to be done?
100%. I mean, I think the difference that's taking place here, and this is, again, a worthwhile note to raise here. There's been a significant difference in the coalition, that is to say, of, in particular, Arab Sunni states that we've seen now join the Israelis in their fight. Specifically, we saw it back in April with the first attack that came from Iran. We saw Saudi involvement. We saw Jordanian involvement. And the point that needs to be made here is that all of these Arab Sunni countries, first of all, see that Iran is the largest destabilizing factor in the region at large, and they understand what that threat means to them at large. And they also can distinguish between myth and reality, that actually Iran is the threat and not the state of Israel. Secondly, no less important, which I think that we will see more of with the incoming new administration, is the fact that much of these relationships that have to do with military collaboration and economic collaboration also have to do with the expansion of the Abraham Accords. And that was a significant move as far as normalized ties between Israel and its neighbors. Obviously, the Saudis are next on the list when it comes to trying to formalize these ties as well. But the Saudis, for sure, understand the threat of what's coming out of Yemen, given the border they share, not to mention the Houthis. All of that is part of the understanding when it comes to Saudi involvement and the involvement when it comes to the Red Sea. And so, yes, I would like to see, I definitely share that sentiment. I would like to see more people step up, more world leaders. Unfortunately, you're seeing comments that have came out even of the attack today out of the United Nations. Antonio Guterres, was making, these, sympathetic statements. The fact that the Israelis are the aggressor and they're hurting the poor communities in Hodeidah and in Sanaa and other areas, without, of course, highlighting the fact that these are indeed terrorist organizations who are the aggressor and started this war. So there is a perverse reality when it comes to entities like the United Nations and other entities in Europe who keep on trying to turn and put the blame on the Israelis rather than look on what's actually happening on the ground. And that, once again, highlights the disconnect between the reality in the Middle East and the perceived reality that is used by all these adversaries of Israel and the United States that are looking to create a facade. And this is where the economic warfare, the propaganda warfare that has played out here since the beginning of the war, that has been used and abused by the Iranians and Iranian proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah. It's exactly the kind of fallacious narrative that you see on American college campuses, where college students are going around and adorning themselves with flags of Hamas and Hezbollah, actually supporting terrorism on American college campuses. So this is all part of that psychological warfare that is based on propaganda that is being amplified by this narrative. My hope is that under a new administration, the need and necessity to reestablish deterrence right now and to stand by our ally Israel, who is literally fighting many of America's enemies. And if they don't continue that fight, those enemies will indeed come home. They're already here, but they'll be coming in larger volumes and mass. And so I think that those are the concerns that we should be raising time and time again, as you and I have discussed.
Dr. Asaf, right now transitioning and giving you and the viewers a live look out in Jerusalem, Israel, the capital of Israel. And we know at this hour, as we are discussing the conflict with the Yemen Houthi rebels, Israel also facing conflict with Hezbollah, also with Hamas. Do we have any updates on those fronts? I know eyes are still on, during this holiday season, eyes are on Gaza as people are holding strong in hopes for a ceasefire, hoping that Hamas will release their loved ones, dead or alive, that are still in captivity.
100%. I mean, that battle still continues, and this has been the delicate balance that the Israelis have been fighting since the beginning of the war. I.e., how do you win the war as if there were no hostages, and how do you bring the hostages home as if there is no war? And I think that that's really been the difficulty, and the hardest part of all this war. There are still, to remind your viewers, of course, and everybody, that there are still 7 American hostages. Again, there's American hostages in Gaza. We're talking about the estimations, about 96 total hostages that hopefully are still alive. In addition to all the dead, the goal is to bring all of them home, and that's exactly what the negotiations have been taking place here. There is definitely a lot of pressure coming down from the outgoing administration to show that they, to bring a win as it relates to supporting Israel in this fight. And there's pressure coming on from the Egyptians and from Doha and from others to try to move this along. My concern is always, as you and I have mentioned this time and time again, dealing with the Qataris, who have been literally complicit with creation and sponsoring of 10/7, is obviously very concerning to me as far as the trust level that all of this plays out. That being said, there's an immense amount of pressure to try to move this along. And obviously the other part that's, of course, impacting all of this is the new reality in the post-Assad reality in Syria, how all of this is shifting and impacting what is happening in countries like Turkey, who is another country who has been a patron of Hamas, and they're, of course, connected to Iran. And so where do they play into all of this role at large as well is another arena to look at, as we look at these moving parts here. And can there be enough pressure being put, given, what the exchange is going to look like? And they're demanding high-value targets and high-value prisoners that Israel has in Israeli prisons in exchange. Israel is willing to do that, not at any cost, but the deal has to be a good deal. And I think that's what you're seeing play out here in the last days of this year, with the hope that in this holiday season something can happen.
Dr. Asaf Romirowsky, always a pleasure having you on the show. We appreciate your expertise, your candidness, your perspective on all things Middle East. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, as always. Much appreciated.
Thank you.